Especially for you, my dear, Elaine said with a gleam in her eyes, setting the steaming mug on the table in front of me. Her voice carried a sugary sweetness, so polished it felt almost artificial, like syrup drizzled over something rancid beneath. I smiled in response, though my stomach twisted in quiet unease. That's very thoughtful, I replied lightly, wrapping both hands around the cup to absorb the heat into my palms. Still, something wasn't right. Instead of the rich, comforting aroma of fresh coffee, a peculiar chemical undertone wafted up, tinged with a metallic sharpness that irritated the back of my throat even before I took a sip. Across from me, my husband Ethan barely acknowledged the exchange. His gaze remained glued to his phone. 1. Arm casually thrown over the chair, radiating his usual air of indifference and entitlement. Go on, drink up, Elaine chirped, her eyes practically sparkling. I made it exactly how you like it. That was a lie. She had never cared how I took my coffee. Not once in the past 7 years. 7 long years at this very table, tolerating her passive-aggressive remarks and watching her manipulate Ethan like a seasoned puppeteer, all while reinforcing the notion that I wasn't good enough for him, that I was merely lucky to have him. And Ethan. He thrived on her approval, playing the golden son who could never be wrong. In her eyes, he was perfection incarnate, while I remained the perpetual outsider, barely tolerated, never embraced. My grip on the mug tightened. I glanced at Ethan again, still lost in his digital world, completely unaware of how intently his mother was studying my cup. I noticed the slight twitch in her jaw, the way her gaze clung to that ceramic rim. Why was she watching so closely? Then it clicked. This wasn't the first time I'd felt suspicious about something she served me. 2 months earlier, after a seemingly harmless family dinner, I had spent the entire night doubled over on the bathroom floor, racked with stomach cramps. Elaine, of course, had played the part of the concerned matriarch perfectly. Excerpt. Maybe your stomach's just a bit too sensitive, dear, she had cooed, patting my hand. You really should be more mindful of what you eat. Ethan, predictably, had rolled his eyes, accusing me of ruining another evening with my dramatic episodes. Another time, it had been tea at her place that left me dizzy and disoriented, my limbs feeling foreign and clumsy. Again, Elaine's voice was full of feigned concern. Perhaps you're dehydrated, sweetheart. Ethan had only laughed, poking fun at me for being too delicate to handle a simple cup of tea. But this time felt different. Elaine's stare was too sharp, too focused. Her expectations hung thick in the air. She wanted me to drink it. She expected me to. I inhaled slowly, forcing calm into my chest, then casually slid my mug a few inches closer to Ethan, side of the table. I leaned in, feigning sudden interest in my phone. My fingers found the handle of his untouched mug and, in one smooth, practiced movement, I made the switch. The slight sound of ceramic brushing fabric was barely audible. Ethan didn't notice. Still completely absorbed in his scrolling, detached and self-involved as on. I raised his cup, the one I had just claimed as my own, and took a small sip. Black coffee, no sugar. Just the way he liked it. Finally, Ethan reached for the cup originally meant for me. Without hesitation, he took a drink. He didn't even look up. For just a fraction of a second, Elaine's smile broke. It was fleeting, barely perceptible, but I saw it. A flicker of alarm, a shadow of panic darting across her features before she recovered and fixed that same syrupy expression back onto her face. Ethan set the mug down. He had no idea what had just happened. No clue that, with one careless sip, he had sealed his fate. I observed quietly. I waited. Ethan let out an exaggerated sigh, rubbing his temple with visible irritation as he scrolled. His usual smug demeanor remained intact. The clock on the wall ticked with steady indifference, counting the seconds since he had taken that first sip. I watched Elaine. Her eyes had locked onto Ethan, flicking toward him every few moments. Her fingers had tightened around the edge of the tablecloth. She was no longer watching me. Leaning back, I forced a relaxed smile onto my face and took another small sip from Ethan's cup. Calm, unbothered. He blinked a few times, rubbing his forehead again. I don't know. I feel weird, he muttered, voice low. Maybe you should have some water, I said evenly, my tone supportive. Elaine's nails dug deeper into the fabric in front of her. Ethan opened his mouth to speak again but stopped short. He swallowed hard, shifted in his seat. A subtle grimace crossed his face as he clenched his jaw, as if trying to fight a wave of nausea. Silence crept in. Suddenly, Elaine scraped her chair back, the sound sharp and jarring against the polished floor. Ethan, honey, maybe you should lie down, she said quickly, too quickly. Her voice cracked with false urgency, like someone trying to contain a spiraling situation. I sat still, heartbeat steady, expression blank. He groaned softly, shaking his head in confusion. No, I just... Beads of sweat gathered at his hairline. His hand trembled as he reached for his water glass, fingers fumbling. I didn't look away. I couldn't. The truth had settled deep into my bones. She knew. She knew something was in that cup. Elaine suddenly stood, stepping toward him like she believed she could somehow undo what had been done. Let me get you something, sweetheart, she said, voice cracking under the weight of panic. A cold cloth, maybe. But it wasn't concern fueling her. It was the terror of losing her grip, of watching everything slip out of her control. Ethan clenched his jaw and waved his mother off. Just give me a minute, he murmured, pressing his fingers against the bridge of his nose. I leaned in slightly, my attention fixed on Elaine's face. I'm confused, I said calmly, feigning bewilderment. Ethan, you just drank the very same coffee your mother made for me. So if I'm feeling fine, why aren't you? Elaine froze. Her face lost all color. While Ethan still seemed too foggy to fully register what I was implying, Elaine's response was immediate. Her breathing shifted, faltered. I don't know, she stammered, eyes darting toward him. Maybe he's coming down with something. Coming down with something. I echoed the phrase, repeating it in my mind, letting it burrow deeper. How many times had I been coming down with something over the years? How many nights had I spent curled in agony on the bathroom floor while Ethan brushed me off and Elaine tilted her head in polite disinterest? But now, this time, it wasn't me. Ethan rubbed his face with sluggish movements, noticeably paler now. He mumbled under his breath, then stood up far too quickly. As soon as he pushed back from the table, his body teetered off balance. The loud scrape of his chair echoed as he stumbled toward the kitchen counter, grabbing it for support. Whoa, he mumbled. What is going on? Elaine moved instantly, her body propelled by instinct and need to regain control. Sweetheart, just sit back down. I'll know, I cut in sharply. I'm calling a doctor. They both froze. Ethan blinked rapidly, clearly trying to steady himself. It's nothing, he muttered. I just need a second. He had no idea how serious it was. Not yet. Elaine's breath had become shallow, barely controlled. Her eyes flicked from me to Ethan and back again, but the fear was impossible to hide now. It was written across her face, clear, raw, undeniable. This was no accident. This wasn't some poorly brewed coffee or a strange reaction to caffeine. No, Elaine had put something in that cup. And Ethan. He was finally experiencing what I had endured again and again. Disorientation, betrayal, a body rebelling against itself. My heart thudded steadily in my chest, but I kept my features composed. I pushed my chair back and stood. I'm calling an ambulance, I said firmly. Ethan waved weakly, a gesture of protest, but the panic in his eyes betrayed him. He could feel it now, that growing lack of control. Elaine surged forward and grabbed his arm. No, there's no need for that. I turned to her slowly, my expression unreadable, and then I smiled. Why not? I asked in a tone so soft it was sharp. She flinched. Her lips parted as if to respond, but nothing came. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. For years, she had tried to convince me that I was overreacting, too sensitive, weak. But now, she was the one who looked fragile. I crossed my arms and tilted my head slightly. Unless, I said, drawing the words out carefully, There's a reason you don't want a doctor to see him. The silence in the room was suffocating. Elaine stared at me, and for the first time in all our years of knowing each other, I saw it. She was scared of me. True fear. Her fingers twitched at her sides as she scrambled to maintain the upper hand, but it was already slipping through her grasp. Ethan was fading fast. His shoulders sagged, breath coming in slow, shallow pulls. He clung to the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Still, his pride held on. "I don't need a doctor," he muttered, though his voice was tight and brittle. "Just give me a minute." I raised a brow, my arms folded tighter. "Ethan, you can barely stand. I'm calling emergency services." Pulling my phone from my pocket, I hovered my fingers over the screen. That's when Elaine lunged. She reached across the table and seized my wrist with unexpected force. "There's no need," she said quickly, her tone edged with desperation. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I just looked at her, closely, really looked. She was trembling, not from concern, but from panic. Real, unfiltered panic. Her pupils were dilated, her breath uneven. This wasn't maternal worry. This was fear. "What did you put in his coffee, Elaine?" I asked slowly. All the color vanished from her face. Ethan's head jerked up at the question, his foggy eyes finding his mother's. There was a flicker of clarity there, a horrible, dawning clarity. She hesitated. That alone was enough. Ethan exhaled sharply, as if finally understanding what I'd been trying to tell him all along. Elaine had done something to him. She shook her head weakly, mouth opening, then closing again as she scrambled for an excuse. But she couldn't find one fast enough. It was too late. I wasn't the docile daughter, in law anymore. I yanked my wrist free and hit the call button. Elaine's panic turned to fury. She slammed her palms down on the table, eyes blazing. "Claire, stop this. You're blowing everything out of proportion." I gave her a slow, deliberate smile. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what Ethan used to say when I was the one who felt sick." Ethan went still, the words sliced into him like a blade. He stared at the floor, as if trying to grasp how he had missed so much for so long. Ellen turned toward him, panic giving way to pleading. "Sweetheart," she cooed. "She's overreacting. You're just tired. Let's get you to bed." But Ethan flinched away from her. For the first time, he recoiled from his mother's touch. He didn't trust her. I don't. His voice was frayed, his body trembling under the weight of whatever had been in that drink, but the truth was finally cracking through. He knew. It hit him like a fog, dense, heavy, undeniable. I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm but unyielding. "You don't feel right, do you?" He shook his head. The arrogance was gone. His hands were shaking. The phone rang in my hand. Elaine went still, her body locking up. A calm voice crackled through the speaker. 911. What's your emergency?" Before she could stop me, I turned away from her, walked toward the hallway. "I need an ambulance," I said clearly, each syllable deliberate, making sure every word echoed through the house. Ethan sagged against the counter. He could barely hold himself upright now. Elaine's world was shattering. I could hear her shallow, erratic breathing, but I didn't look back. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. "This is Claire Whitemore," I said, my voice steady. "My husband drank something at his mother's home. He's short of breath, weak, sweating profusely. I let the words hang there for a beat. I believe he was poisoned." That was the truth. Raw, undeniable, unflinching. Elaine crumpled into her chair. A strangled gasp left her lips. She had lost control completely. A long silence filled the space before Ethan, still hunched and struggling to breathe, finally found the strength to speak. "Mom." His voice cracked, filled with disbelief, hurt, betrayal. "What? What the hell did you do to me?" Elaine had no answer. There was nothing left to say. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, slicing through the silence like a blade. And I smiled, because for the first time in years, Elaine held no power over anyone in this room. The scream of the ambulance grew sharper, cutting through the heavy tension that had gripped the kitchen. Ellen sat rigid, her fists clenched on the table, her carefully curated composure reduced to a desperate mess. Ethan, pale and drenched in sweat, remained slouched against the counter, his breathing shallow and erratic, every muscle in his body visibly struggling to hold on. I stood in the space between them, phone still in hand, heart pounding with clarity. It was finally happening. After years of belittlement, gaslighting, and manipulation, years of being told I was fragile, delusional, weak. For years, I had been told I was imagining things, overreacting, being dramatic. But now the truth was crashing into Ethan with the force of a freight train. The very man who had dismissed my pain, defended his mother at every turn, and accused me of exaggerating, now stared at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. The first flicker of realization had begun to show. He was finally seeing her clearly, and the weight of that recognition terrified him. Outside, the flashing red and blue lights cast distorted shapes across the window as the ambulance screeched to a stop in front of the house. Elaine's head jerked toward the light. "No," she whispered under her breath. I turned to her, calm and steady, already knowing what came next. "It's happening," I said simply. She shook her head slowly, her eyes darting from me to Ethan and back, as though there was still time to undo everything, as if she could somehow flip the narrative again. Abruptly, she stood, her chair dragged noisily across the floor. "Listen to me, Claire," she hissed, desperation cutting into her voice like a blade. "If you don't say anything, if you just tell them it was all a misunderstanding, then what?" I interrupted, voice unshaken. "You get to keep doing this. You get to walk away again like nothing happened." Her lips moved, but no sound followed. I canted. She had no reply. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't the first time. And Ethan knew it now too. I turned back to him. The anguish had begun to settle on his face, layer by layer, as the truth took hold. I didn't need to say it. He was reliving every moment. All the nights I'd been sick, the accusations of being overdramatic, the smug looks from his mother. It all came back now, and it was breaking him. The front door burst open, and 2 paramedics rushed in. Elaine shrank back, pressing herself against the wall like she could vanish into it. "What's his condition?" one of them asked urgently. "He's dizzy, sweating, disoriented," I said clearly. "It began about an hour ago, right after he drank his coffee." One of them immediately moved to assess Ethan while the other prepared the stretcher. "What was in the coffee?" the second paramedic asked, already scanning for answers. I turned toward Elaine. She stood motionless, not blinking, barely breathing. Then I looked back to the paramedic. "I don't know," I said, raising my voice just enough, "but his mother made it, and it was meant for me. That was all it took." Elaine's entire body tensed. One of the paramedics turned to her. "Ma'am, is that true?" She didn't respond. She searched for words, for a path out of this, but none existed now. Not anymore. Ethan, voice hoarse and trembling, finally broke the silence. "Mom," he said, pausing to swallow, "what did you do to me?" Elaine flinched. The word struck her like a slap. The paramedics had already lifted Ethan onto the stretcher. One of them turned to me. "He needs immediate transport. Will you be riding with us?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. Elaine stepped forward, a last-ditch effort to salvage control. "Wait." I stopped, turned toward her with a neutral expression. "You should probably get a lawyer," I said quietly. Then I walked out, leaving her there, speechless, powerless. The hospital air was thick with antiseptic, tinged with the unmistakable metallic bite of blood and chemicals. The steady beeping of machines filled the space, each sound a grim reminder of how close Ethan had come to the edge. I sat in the far corner of the emergency room, watching as doctors moved around him, checking vitals, asking questions, ordering tests. Ethan lay motionless, his skin pale, his body drained. But his eyes were open, and for the first time in years he was looking at me, truly seeing me. There was no arrogance in that gaze now, just guilt, deep and real. A doctor approached, his expression unreadable as he glanced at the chart in his hands. "Mister," chart in his hands. Mr. Whitmore, your test results show elevated levels of a toxic compound, he said. It's a chemical often found in prescription sedatives. You're lucky the dose wasn't higher. Ethan swallowed with difficulty. Then the doctor turned to me. You said his mother prepared the kahai. I nodded. Yes, she made it for me, but he drank it instead. The doctor's eyes narrowed slightly. This will need to be reported. Authorities take these kinds of cases seriously. Ethan's hands curled into tight fists, his face clouded with silent rage and shame. He knew what came next: consequences, accountability. The doctor gave me a small, respectful nod and walked away, leaving behind a silence that seemed to press on both of us. Eventually, Ethan broke it. I exhaled and leaned back into the chair. Didn't you? His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize either. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who offered apologies easily, but this time he couldn't even meet my eyes. The silence returned, long, heavy, built from years of looking the other way. How long? I asked, my voice steady. His head turned slightly, brow furrowing. What? How long have you suspected that something was wrong? I repeated calmly, that this wasn't just bad luck or coincidence. Then his face changed. Just for a second. Regret, recognition. I knew that expression well. He had always known. Maybe not with certainty, maybe never in words, but he had seen the signs. He had watched it happen too many times. The way my body betrayed me, always after something his mother prepared. He had chosen to ignore it, because admitting the truth meant admitting that he had failed me, that he had let it happen. Ethan parted his lips, then shut them again. He looked like he wanted to say something, needed to, that he was sorry, that he should have protected me, that he regretted trusting her over me. But none of that would matter now. I exhaled and turned my gaze toward the window, watching the distant shimmer of city lights blinking. In rhythm. You always sided with her, I said quietly. Ethan flinched ever so slightly. You told yourself I was being dramatic. You thought I was making it, up fishing for attention. I shook my head slowly. You never believed me. His breathing faltered, uneven and shallow. Claire, no. My voice was flat, unshakable. You don't get to say my name like that anymore. He winced but didn't argue. He couldn't. Not now. The door opened, and a nurse stepped in. Mr. Whitmore, she said. There's a detective here to speak with you. Ethan tensed. This was it, the unraveling. Every lie, every deflection, every moment he had ignored what he didn't want to face. Now staring him down with nowhere to run. The hospital door swung wide and in stepped Detective Rowan, a woman in her mid-40s with razor, sharp eyes, and the calm confidence of someone who carried authority like a second skin. She held a small notebook and a voice recorder, her expression unreadable but firm. Ethan barely lifted his head, drained and worn down by whatever had been in that poisoned cup, my cup. I remained seated in the corner, arms crossed over my chest, heart steady, watching. Mr. Whitmore, the detective greeted, her tone clipped and all business. But I understand you had an adverse reaction to something in your drink. Ethan swallowed hard, eyes scanning the room before settling on me. Not on the detective, not on the wall, on me, as if I still held the power to shield him. But I didn't move. I met his eyes without blinking. For years he had stood by while his mother chipped away at me, and he had done nothing. Now he was the one weakened. And I wasn't going to be his shield. I lifted a single eyebrow, giving him nothing. Ethan finally turned to the detective, jaw tightening. Yeah, he mumbled. Something was wrong with the coffee. Detective Rowan nodded and flipped open her notebook. Your wife informed us that your mother made the drink specifically for her and that you consumed it by mistake. Is that accurate? Silence. A long, tense silence. Ethan was caught between two versions of the truth. Admit it and betray his mother, or lie and betray himself. Eventually, he exhaled. Yeah, that's right. She jotted something down. Has anything like this happened before? Again. He didn't answer right away. I tilted my head, watching him closely. Go ahead, lie. Pretend it was a one-time accident. Pretend you didn't know. His fingers twitched against the blanket. He knew I wasn't going to protect him this time. He had let too much go unchecked already. He dragged a hand down his face. I don't know, he muttered. I mean, Claire's been sick before, but I thought— You thought what? I interrupted with a cold laugh. That I was imagining things, that I was just being sensitive. His face clouded with shame. He didn't deny it because he couldn't. We both knew the truth. Detective Rowan's tone sharpened. Mr. Whitmore, your records show no prior health conditions that would explain today's reaction. However, your wife has been admitted multiple times in recent years with nearly identical symptoms. Do you understand the significance of that? Ethan didn't reply. This was the moment where he would finally have to decide. And multiple— continue protecting his mother or admit the truth about what she had done. I leaned forward slightly. My voice was calm, but hard as steel. You knew something wasn't right. You always did. But because it didn't affect you, you chose to ignore it. His breathing grew shallow. I didn't stop. Every time I landed in the every time I begged you to take it seriously, you brushed it off. You laughed. You made me feel crazy. I stood slowly and stepped closer. But not anymore. Now you know. Now you feel it. Ethan closed his eyes. His silence said everything. Detective Rowan didn't pause. She shut her notebook with a firm snap. We'll need to speak with your mother. Officers are already en route to her residence. If she attempts to flee, she'll be taken into custody immediately. Elaine, the master manipulator, the woman who had poisoned more than just my body, had finally lost control. The detective turned back to Ethan. Mr. Whitmore, would you like to press charges? Ethan hesitated. And for the first time since we married, he looked at me. Not as someone to control, not as someone beneath him, but as someone who might hold the answer. And maybe, once upon a time, I would have stood beside him. But not now. I smoothed down the front of my jacket and stood straighter. That's not my decision, I said clearly. It's Ethan's. He looked crushed, regret flooding his face. But I didn't give him anything, not a word, not a glance. Detective Rowan nodded. We'll return with additional questions after she's in custody. In the meantime, Mr. Whitmore, I'd advise you to think very carefully about what comes next. With that, she turned and exited the room. I followed. I didn't look back. I didn't pause for excuses, apologies, or any flicker of guilt. The moment I stepped into that hallway, something in me crystallized. This had never just been about poison in my coffee. This had been about trust, about betrayal, about the man who stood by while I was slowly destroyed. And as my phone vibrated in my hand, a message from my attorney lighting up the screen, I allowed myself a slow, final smile. Because this wasn't just the end of a toxic plot. It was the end of my marriage,